I never imagined I'd be the kind of person caught up in a neighborhood dispute, let alone one involving the homeowners association. But here I am. I'm Ethan Williams, a software developer who mostly works from home. I keep to myself, make sure the lawn's mowed, and do my best to be a good neighbor. My place is in Oak Ridge Estates, a nice little suburb with well-kept homes and, unfortunately, an HOA board that has way too much time on its hands. When I bought the house 3 years ago, it all seemed perfect. The previous owners had converted the garage into a home office with big windows, which was great for my remote work setup. There was still space to park one car, and I had a detached carport out back for my second vehicle. It worked out perfectly for me, until Olivia Carter moved in next door, and within 6 months was elected to the HOA board. Livrisha, or Liv, as she insisted everyone call her, even though she introduced herself as Mrs. Carter to new homeowners, was in her mid-50s. She had this angular blonde bob haircut that seemed to get sharper by the week. She drove a spotless white Lexus SUV with a personalized plate that read, Live Time. Every time I saw that plate, I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Our first minor disagreement came when she complained about the small collection of succulents I had on my front porch. Apparently, they weren't approved vegetation. I didn't want any trouble, so I moved them to the backyard. Next up was the issue with my garbage bins being visible from the street for about 30 minutes longer than they should have been after collection. Again, I changed my routine to bring them in earlier, hoping that would put an end to it. But with Livrisha, there was always something else. First, it was the color of my mailbox. Then it was the bird feeder in my backyard that was supposedly attracting unwanted wildlife. Even the delivery packages that sat on my porch during meetings were a problem. Each tiny infraction earned me a printed notice in my mailbox, a text message, and sometimes even a personal visit, where Olivia would stand way too close and talk in this syrupy sweet voice that made my skin crawl. Ethan, honey, we all have to follow the same rules. It's what keeps our property values high, you know? I'm just doing my job as a board member. I kept my cool through it all, taking care of each complaint while doing my best to avoid too much interaction. This strategy worked fine until the whole carport incident. One rainy Tuesday morning, I was in the middle of an important video call with some clients when I heard a car horn blaring outside my house. I tried to ignore it, but after 5 minutes of constant honking, I had to apologize to the clients and step away. When I went outside, holding an umbrella, I saw Olivia sitting in her white Lexus under my carport, honking the horn and staring at me through the windshield. I walked over, and she cracked her window just enough to speak without letting any rain in. Ethan, move your car. I've been sitting here, getting wet. I blinked, confused as the rain drummed against my umbrella. What? This is my carport, Livrisha. She rolled her eyes like I was the one being difficult. The streets flooded near my driveway, and I didn't want water damage on my car. Your carport was empty, so I figured you wouldn't mind if I used it for a bit. I looked over and, sure enough, my car was in the garage because I'd been bringing in groceries when the rain started. Yes, the carport was temporarily empty, but that didn't mean it was a free-for-all. Livrisha, I'm in the middle of an important call, and this is my property. You can't just park here without asking. Her expression hardened. Well, I'm asking now. Move your car out of the garage so I can pull in there. The rain's blowing into the carport. The nerve of it all left me momentarily speechless. No, Livrisha, I'm not moving my car. This is my property, and I need you to leave. She glared at me for a good 30 seconds before finally backing out. I'll be talking to the board about this. There should be emergency provisions for situations like this. You're being very unreasonable, Ethan. As she drove off, she made sure to splash muddy water all over my shoes and pants. That evening, I got an email from the HOA with the subject line, Proposed Amendment for Community Emergency Vehicle Accommodations. The proposal would require homeowners with extra parking to let neighbors use it during weather emergencies. Olivia was listed as the contact for the amendment. I forwarded the email to a lawyer friend who confirmed what I already suspected. They couldn't force me to let others park on my property. My friend helped me draft a firm reply to the entire HOA board, not just Larisha, hoping that would put an end to it. But it didn't. The next weekend, I came home from grocery shopping to find a white Lexus SUV parked inside my garage, my actual garage, not the carport. The door was open, her vehicle was inside, and Olivia was nowhere in sight. I sat in my car, stunned, trying to process what I was looking at. How did she get the garage door open? Then I remembered. During an HOA inspection a while back, she'd asked for access to check some wiring that was supposedly visible from outside. I had given her the code to the exterior keypad, never imagining she'd use it for something like this. There was a note taped to the door inside my garage. Ethan had to go to an emergency board meeting. My driveway's being resealed today, and I couldn't park on the street because of the construction on Maple. Used your garage since you weren't home. Thanks for understanding. Liv. I stood there, staring at the note, in disbelief. She had entered my property without permission, used my garage door code without authorization, and left her car in my garage like it was no big deal, as if we had some sort of agreement. I walked into the house, changed the code on the keypad, and disabled the manual override inside the garage by removing its battery. Finally, I texted Larisha. I see you parked in my garage without permission. The code has been changed. Please contact me when you return so we can discuss this breach of privacy. 3 hours later, she texted, Ethan, I need to get my car. Please open the garage. I waited 15 minutes before replying. I'm in a meeting. I'll be free in an hour. In the future, please don't enter my property or use my garage without explicit permission. About 10 minutes later, the doorbell started ringing nonstop. I checked my security camera, and sure enough, there was Larisha frantically pressing the button while chatting away on her phone like she was having the most important conversation of her life. I decided to let her stew for a while longer. When I finally opened the door, after about 30 minutes, she was in full-on righteous fury mode. Her face was red, and she'd been pacing on my porch so much that she'd worn a path into the welcome mat. This is absolutely ridiculous, she blurted out before I could even say a word. I've been standing here for nearly an hour. I've got an important appointment, and you've basically taken my car hostage. I could get the police involved in this. I stayed calm, leaning against the doorframe, and asked, and what exactly would you tell them? You came onto my property without permission, used a security code that was meant for a one-time use, and parked your car in my garage without asking. If anyone's calling the cops, it should be me. She huffed. It was an emergency. My driveway's being sealed. That's not an emergency, Larisha. I shot back. That's scheduled maintenance you knew about ahead of time. You could have asked someone to give you a ride or called a ride service. Now open my garage. She crossed her arms. I'm already late. I shook my head, standing my ground. We need to settle something first. Do you realize what you did was out of line and a serious invasion of my privacy? She scowled. You're making way too big of a deal out of this. Neighbors help each other all the time. Help that's asked for and agreed to, sure, I replied. Not help that's just assumed. I need you to admit you overstepped before I open that garage. Larisha's face turned beet red, and I swear I could almost see smoke coming out of her ears. For someone who liked to think she ran the neighborhood, being held accountable was clearly new territory for her. Fine, she hissed through gritted teeth. I should have asked before using your garage. Now, can you please open it? It wasn't much of an apology, but it was probably the best I'd get. I nodded and grabbed my phone to open the garage door remotely. Also, I need you to delete the old security code from your phone. It won't work anymore, but I want to make sure it's gone. With a reluctant sigh, she pulled out her phone, opened the Notes app, and deleted something while showing me the screen. I pressed the button on my app, and the garage door started to rise. Olivia stormed past me, got into her Lexus, fired up the engine, and peeled out of my driveway like she was in a race, tires squealing as she rounded the corner. I watched her drive off, thinking that would be the end of it. But the next morning, there was a notice from the HOA stuck to my front door. It was some official-looking nonsense claiming that my home office conversion didn't meet current regulations, and I had 30 days to turn it back into a garage. It was a blatant, petty attack. The previous owners had gotten all the necessary permits, and I had every bit of documentation. In the 3 years I'd lived there, the HOA never mentioned a thing. It was pure retaliation, plain and simple. My lawyer confirmed what I already knew. The HOA couldn't enforce a new rule on a legal conversion that had been approved years ago. She drafted a letter back, referencing legal precedents and hinting at possible legal action if they kept harassing me. That evening, as I was still turning everything over in my mind, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Checking the security camera, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Livrisha's white Lexus was in my garage again. I had left the garage open while bringing in some yard tools, and there she was, just parking her car and walking off like nothing was wrong. No note, no explanation, just the assumption that she could use my space whenever she pleased. As she strolled down the street, probably heading to another HOA meeting, I made up my mind. If she wanted to play these games, I could too, only I'd do it by the book. I hit the button on my app to close the garage and headed to the hardware store. An hour later, I came back with a heavy-duty padlock and a hasp. I installed it on the inside of the garage door so that even if someone punched in the right code, they couldn't open it from outside. The door itself wasn't damaged, but no one was getting in without me. I made myself a cup of tea and sat down with a book in my living room, where I could see the street through the window. About 2 hours later, Olivia showed up. She walked straight to the keypad, typed in the code. Apparently, she had memorized it after all, and looked confused when nothing happened. She tried again, then pulled out her phone, probably to double-check the code. After a few more failed attempts, she stomped up to my front door and rang the bell. I counted to 30 before casually opening the door, acting surprised. "Livrisha, what's up?" Her strained smile told me she was holding back some serious frustration. "The garage door isn't working. I need to get my car." I raised an eyebrow. "Your car? In my garage? Again? Without asking? After we just talked about this yesterday." Her smile twitched. "I was in a hurry, and you weren't home. I figured it would be fine since the door was open. It's only for a few hours." I shook my head. "It's not fine, Livrisha. We literally just discussed boundaries and respecting other people's property. You're trespassing, and you've taken my space without asking. Again." She huffed. "Look, I don't have time for this. Just open the garage. The board meeting ran late, and I need to go home." I kept my voice calm. "I've installed a manual lock on the inside for security reasons. You understand, right? After having unauthorized people park in my garage, I thought it was necessary." Her eyes widened in shock. "You locked my car in your garage? That's illegal. You can't hold my car hostage." I sighed. "No, I secured my property after repeated invasions of my privacy. Your unauthorized parking doesn't give you any special rights here. But don't worry, I'll be happy to open the garage tomorrow morning around 9 a.m. "Tomorrow morning?" she shrieked. "That's just absurd. I need my car now, and I expected you to respect my space and privacy. But it seems we don't always get what we want, do we?" I kept my tone steady. "You've left notices, filed complaints, tried pushing through new HOA rules just to target me, and you've repeatedly entered my property without my consent. This is just the result of your own actions." "I'll call the police," she snapped, pulling out her phone as if that would scare me. "Go ahead," I said with a shrug. "I've got security footage of you waltzing into my garage without permission, and I've got records of our previous talks where you admitted this was out of line. Plus, I've got a lawyer who's going to be more than interested in your continued harassment. I'm sure the police will be just as curious." She froze, staring at me with the phone in hand, probably trying to figure out if I was bluffing. After a tense pause, she lowered the phone, clearly realizing I wasn't. "This isn't over," she growled. "The board's going to hear about this." "I'm sure they will," I replied calmly. "My lawyer and maybe even the local news might too, if necessary. I've got everything documented, Livrisha. Every notice, every text, every single clip from my security cameras showing you on my property without permission. If you want to take this further, I'm ready." Something in my voice must have hit home because I saw a flicker of doubt cross her face. She gave an angry huff, spun around, and marched off down the street, probably off to call for a ride. The next morning, I got up early, bracing for another tense encounter. Sure enough, right at 9 a.m., I heard a car pull up outside. When I peeked out the window, I saw Olivia wasn't alone this time. She'd brought backup Howard Johnson, an older guy from the HOA who always seemed pretty reasonable, and Diane Miller, a newer board member who just moved into the neighborhood. Great, she'd brought reinforcements. I took a deep breath, unlocked the padlock on my front door, and stepped outside to meet them. The trio was already heading up the driveway, with Olivia leading the charge, looking determined and grim. "Good morning." I greeted them cheerfully. "Right on time, I see." Olivia didn't bother with pleasantries. "These are board members," she said coldly, "and they're here to witness the situation and make sure there are no misunderstandings." "Perfect," I said with a nod. More witnesses are always good when it comes to documenting inappropriate behavior. Behind them, the garage door was already rolling up. "Your illegally parked car is ready to be collected." Howard and Diane exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly trying to figure out what kind of mess they'd been dragged into. Howard stepped forward with a polite smile. "Ethan, Livrishes mentioned some concerns about ongoing disagreements. Maybe we could sit down and discuss this as neighbors." "I'm always open to a reasonable conversation," I said, "but just so we're all on the same page here. Livrishes repeatedly entered my property without my permission, used my garage without my consent, filed complaints in retaliation when I confronted her about it, and is now trying to use her HOA authority to keep harassing me. I have everything documented, and my lawyer's already reviewing it." Howard's eyebrows shot up, and he turned to Livrisha. "You parked in his garage without permission?" "More than once." Olivia waved her hand dismissively. "It was an emergency. He's blowing this way out of proportion, and now he's retaliating by locking my car inside." "Actually," I interjected, "I secured my own property after she repeatedly entered without authorization. The fact that she decided to park there again is her problem, not mine." Diane, looking concerned, spoke up. "Livrisha, you told us Ethan agreed to let you park there temporarily, but then maliciously locked your car inside. That doesn't seem to match what I'm hearing now." Livrisha's face turned red. "He's twisting everything. I left him a note the first time." "A note doesn't equal permission," I said. "And there wasn't even a note this time, just another assumption that my property was hers to use." That afternoon, I came back from a quick grocery run only to find Livrisha's Lexus parked in my driveway again. This time, she wasn't even using the garage, just blocking the whole entrance on purpose. It was beyond just being petty at this point. This was flat-out harassment. I snapped pictures from all sorts of angles, making sure to capture the time and date, then called the non-emergency police line to report that her car was blocking my driveway. While waiting for an officer, I also got in touch with a tow truck company. About 20 minutes later, Officer Jenkins showed up and I walked him through what was going on. I even showed him security footage from before, along with all the evidence of Livrisha's escalating behavior. "So she's intentionally parking here to block you out? And this is after you've already told her not to park here?" Officer Jenkins asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yep, that's right," I confirmed. "She's stepping things up after I made sure she couldn't use my garage without permission." He nodded while jotting down some notes. "All right, I'll file a report and go talk to her." He headed over to Livrisha's place, while I stayed by my car watching. I couldn't hear their conversation, but from the way Olivia was waving her arms behind her storm door, it was clear she wasn't too happy. They talked for about 10 minutes before Officer Jenkins came back. "She's claiming there's been some kind of mix-up with the parking rules around here," he said, though it was obvious he didn't quite buy it. "I told her she needs to move her car right away and that she can't park on your property unless she has your written permission in the future. I've got this incident on record, so you can use it if you need to show a pattern of behavior later on. If the car isn't moved in 15 minutes, you can have it towed." 5 minutes later, Olivia stormed out of her house, shot me a nasty glare, and hopped into her Lexus. Without a second thought for safety, she backed out and sped away. The next day, I found an official-looking envelope in my mailbox. It was a notice about an emergency HOA meeting scheduled for the next evening, with parking violations and property use listed as the main agenda items. Olivia had signed it at the bottom. I decided to bring my lawyer along to the meeting. When we walked in, Livricia's face went through a mix of emotions: surprise, anger, and maybe even a little bit of fear. She kicked off the meeting by talking about neighborhood standards and claimed some residents were against community cooperation. I passed out copies of the documentation showing her repeated trespassing and her retaliatory stunts. To Livricia's visible frustration, other residents started sharing their own stories. Stories of selective enforcement of rules, unprofessional behavior, and getting retaliatory notices whenever they didn't agree with her. What was supposed to be a meeting about parking violations was quickly turning into a full-on examination of Livricia's behavior on the board. This meeting is supposed to be about parking, not personal complaints. Olivia squeaked, her voice going up an octave. Howard, another resident, jumped in. Actually, this meeting is about the community's concerns, which clearly go beyond just parking. By the end of the meeting, it was agreed that the HOA's governance procedures needed to be reviewed. Olivia was later voted out of the board at the next official meeting, and Howard was elected as the new president, bringing a more cooperative approach to how the neighborhood was run. 3 weeks later, Olivia put her house up for sale. On the day she moved out, I caught her eye from across the street. I gave her a small wave, a sort of acknowledgement of our shared history. She gave me a tight, reluctant nod before driving off in her Lexus, still sporting the same personalized Live Time license plate. That was the last time I ever saw Olivia Henderson, but her influence stuck around in the form of a fairer, more balanced HOA in a neighborhood that had banded together to stand up against her petty tyranny. As for my garage, I took the padlock off but left the security cameras up. Some lessons are worth holding on to, even after the person who taught them is long gone. Thank you for watching. Hit the subscribe